Hi everybody, I'm Hargis, President of Oklahoma State University, and we're here for another episode of Inside OSU. And this is a very special episode because we have General Lee Levy with us today. General Levy, welcome.
Mr. President, thanks for having us.
We really appreciate it. General Levy is the commanding general of Tinker Air Force Base, which is one of the biggest facilities in the military anywhere in the world. And when did you assume command of Tinker?
So I was blessed enough to take command of the Air Force Sustainment Center in June of 2015, and it really was a real treat to come back to Oklahoma. This is our second assignment here, my wife and I. My wife's actually an Oklahoman, so she was just thrilled about that opportunity. So we've been here about 16, 17 months, and it's just an amazing, amazing experience to command 43,000 airmen around the globe.
Well, we are here in the ROTC Center for Air Force and Army ROTC programs. And I think it might be interesting to, especially the cadets that we have here, but I'm sure all of the OSU family, kind of take you through this process that led you to this commanding general position. Where were you born? Where were you raised?
So I'm 100% Cajun. I was born and raised in New Orleans. Grew up in New Orleans. I grew up about 4 blocks from Tulane University. I got family all over South Louisiana. My family came to South Louisiana in the late 1800s from France. So I grew up there. My mom and dad went to Tulane, and I broke their heart by going to Louisiana State University. As you know, that's a big in-state rivalry. So I'm an LSU graduate. I always knew I wanted to be an airman. I've had a passion for airplanes and aviation, and also I believe that everyone should serve the nation. And so I always saw myself in the future as a kid growing up.
What did you study at LSU?
I was a business major. I started off as an engineering major, and I wasn't quite as disciplined as I should have been, frankly. I regret that now. I wish that if I could sort of set the clock back, I would have done that differently. But
which worked out pretty well for you.
I suppose, but still, I never like to think that I didn't give my 100% dead level best at something. And so if I could have set the clock back a little, I might adjust that a bit.
So did you go right into the military after LSU?
I did because I went through the ROTC program at Louisiana State University. Now, I was a commercial pilot. I flew through college and a little bit after I got my commission. Before, there was just a waiting period between the time when I received my commission and the time I actually went off to begin my active duty service. So I did that, but in essence, straight from ROTC onto active duty, off to technical training, and then so let's see, I've been in 31 years now, lived in 19 different places, not including the multiple deployments around the planet, depending on what time period and what hotspot was going on in the universe. And it's been an amazing journey.
Describe Tinker Air Force Base for our viewers.
It's an amazing reservoir of aerospace capability for the nation. That's how I would describe it. 5,500 acres, about 30,000 people come through the gate every single day. And so I'll kind of bound the problem a little bit. Inside of the state of Oklahoma, there are about 36,200 people that work in the aerospace economic sector. 30,000 of them work on Tinker Air Force Base. It's about $3.2 billion worth of economic activity inside the state of Oklahoma. That doesn't include the supplies and equipment we buy. That's salaries and secondary economic effect. But inside of the fence line, which to some people is sort of a big black hole because you can't get on the base, and particularly after 9/11, the security posture at military installations has become a lot more restrictive. They're taking care of B-52s that date back to 1961. They're performing modification on and overhaul on KC-135s. The Navy E-6B Mercury take charge and move out command and control airplane is based and flies out of there, which is our airborne command post for nuclear command and control. We have people at Tinker.
Those are the ones that spin the long cords or radar.
Well, those are the AWACS guys you see with the big dish on top, and those do airborne command and control. But the Navy airplanes, the white ones, trail a 5-mile long antenna that allows them to talk to submarines if, heaven forbid, we should ever have to do that. And both of those missions are operated right out of Tinker Air Force Base. We have software engineers. So we talk about the 30,000 people that come to work on Tinker every day. Only about 10,000 wear the uniform. The other 20,000 or so wear what you wear to work. They're civil servants. They're our commercial partners who help us do things like write software code for Space Fence, our newest space-based surveillance, write software code for the F-35 or the next B-21 bomber, doing amazing things that you would probably never expect happen right here in the heart of Oklahoma, but happen every single day and make our nation's Air Force the world's most respected airspace and cyber force.
You were deployed in Afghanistan.
I was. Kuwait, Afghanistan, and Oman as a one-star general. So it just goes to show you, even when you're a general officer, you were just an airman. They called me and they said, Levy, grab your stuff, time to go downrange. And as any other airman would do, grabbed my rucksack, grabbed my body armor, got on an airplane and went downrange. In fact, I went there as a one-star. I'd been selected for my second star, and I pinned on my second star while I was deployed. Just goes to show you that when you're an airman first. Your rank is your secondary consideration. You do what the nation asks you to do.
What, as long as we're on the Middle East, and you obviously have experience and no doubt opinions about where we are there and what the future holds. What is your take? Because I think most Americans feel that it's almost hopeless, that everybody's against everybody, and you can't figure out who's shooting at whom.
So a couple of thoughts on that. First, I would repeat something I heard our Chief of Staff of the Air Force, General Dave Goldfein, say recently, and he and I have worked together in jobs past, and I think he's on the money. So we think about what happened on 9/11, and we've sort of been at war for about 15 years or so. His thought, and the thought of some of our other senior leaders, is we were about 15 years into a 30-year war. And for Americans, that's a really difficult concept for us.
Unprecedented.
It really is. But it's a concept that we're not used to as Americans, because we view warfare historically as something, we pack up our equipment and our men and women, we go to wherever the activity is, we unpack, we fight, we pack up, we come back, and it's a fairly contained activity from a timeline perspective. The kinds of wars that we see unfolding in the Middle East region are not quite that tidy. They are really about changing cultures and perspectives. And so I think I'm with the Chief. We're probably about halfway through a 30-year war. The other thing that's important to understand, I think, is not just the military component. It's the diplomatic, the informational, and the economic component of what causes conflict, right? And one of the things that's really essential, I think, for all of us to remember is that until we can change the economic outlook and give young men and women in that part of the world some economic hope that tomorrow will be a better future for them than today is, then we'll have a very difficult time, I think. This is my opinion. I think we'll have a very difficult time getting young men and women to put down their weapons, not strap on an explosive vest, and worry about a future because they have the opportunity to have a better future than they have today.
Is there any argument that the wars of the future are going to be fought on computers, that cyber warfare is going to displace the traditional kinetic wars that we've had?
I don't know that I wouldn't say it as an either or, frankly. That presumes it's either cyber or some sort of kinetic. I think it'll be much more hybrid. I think that wars of the future will happen very, very quickly across multiple domains. And when I say that, air, space, cyber, land domain, the maritime domains, they'll happen all simultaneously, or almost simultaneously. And they'll happen in a variety of places. In the homeland, maybe somewhere in the Pacific, maybe somewhere in Europe, maybe in Africa, maybe in South America. So it could happen in a bunch of those places at the same time, and all of those domains. And there will be a very, very heavy cyber component to it, because Western countries are very reliant on their cyber capabilities, whether it's banking systems, environmental control systems, utility distribution
or
systems,
airplanes.
Aircraft. I mean, aircraft of today are giant software containers. When I look at whether it's a commercial airliner that has some airline's name painted on the side, or a large airplane, or even a small airplane like an F-35 that says United States Air Force on the side, they're full of software. In fact, the KC-46, the newest tanker that's getting ready to come into service in the United States Air Force, has approximately 3 billion lines of software code embedded in it. So that presents great opportunities and capabilities in the platform, but conversely it presents some risk. Now, rest assured, we're very sober about what those risks are. We're very cognizant of them. We have a variety of mitigations built in. But still, it's something you have to pay attention to. And as warfare evolves, your Air Force and your Department of Defense are evolving with it to make sure that warfare across multiple domains is accounted for, and that we're prepared to defend against those adversaries that would do us harm, and so we can impose our will on those adversaries.
We just had a meeting with some of the ROTC students, seniors that are Air Force ROTC. We're very curious about a lot of things that General Levy was able to clear up for them or describe for them. But what's your advice for them?
Bloom where planted. It's amazing how many folks worry that they didn't get the job or at the location that they wanted as they go into their military career, and so they think, well, gosh, I'm just not off to the right start. This might not work out for me. I would tell you, every job in the Air Force is a great job, or every job in the Air Force is a terrible job. It's really down to one person, you. Bloom where planted. When I think back on my career, the Air Force asked me to do a number of things that I just wasn't interested in doing, and I didn't think that was a quote-unquote good deal for me in terms of my Air Force career. But I was also smart enough and had some great supervisors who said, hey, if that's what the Air Force wants you to do, go do it.
Do it well.
Do it well. And I took that advice to heart, and I tried to make hay while the sun shined in those particular jobs, and it's worked out really, really well. And I've had some great supervisors, and I've had some great peers, but more importantly, I've had some great junior airmen who have taught me how to be a pretty good leader and who've helped me stay focused and on course while blooming where planted.
General, after we're through here, we're going to go over to our UAV center. As I mentioned, I think that we have the only master's program in UAVs. We're very focused on them. What role do you see UAVs playing in the future in the military?
Well, an increasingly prevalent role. If you look at the last 15 years in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, from having remotely piloted aircraft that simply do surveillance and reconnaissance to being weaponized both at low, medium, and high altitudes for surveillance, we just see it growing exponentially. In fact, as we also think about how we fly in contested airspace of the future in certain parts of the world, we'll place more and more prevalence on our remotely piloted aircraft. But what I would tell you is that, particularly in the surveillance piece of that, it requires almost more manpower than a piloted airplane. Why is that? Because an airplane flies over a particular piece of real estate, takes a lot of full motion video. Somebody has to look at that. That it's bounced off of satellites or what have you back to some place where some human beings still have to look at that and say, those are friendlies, those are not friendlies, what should we do about it? And so how we manage the data streams that come off these remotely piloted aircraft are absolutely essential. And then the next natural evolution is, how do we swarm them? How do we use them to mass effects against an adversary? Then how do we integrate manned and unmanned platforms in the same battle space so they can communicate, machine-to-machine communication? And anything that we can benefit from your master's program in terms of how we advance that technology, because in reality, that's part of our competitive advantage. That's part of making sure that our Department of Defense and our nation's military are always a step ahead of our potential adversaries.
We have had conversations about your need for engineers at Tinker. Talk about that a little bit, and because our engineering college here has doubled,
right?
And I think we could double again based on the demand for engineers.
So you're absolutely right. So I have about 1,500 scientists and engineers that work at Tinker Air Force Base today. And last year alone, I hired 240 engineers, mostly aerospace, computer science, and software, and some mechanical and some civil, but mostly the first couple that I mentioned. And we talked about the needs of software in our weapon systems of the future and how it's becoming more and more software dependent. That demand signal for engineers is doing nothing but increasing. In fact, I simply can't hire enough engineers. So all the things that you can do as a university to motivate young men and women to an educational path for STEM education that turn out engineers gives me great opportunity to hire them in defense of the nation. And when I say hire them, a lot of people think, oh, you want me to join the Air Force and put on a uniform? Well, yes, we do recruit those sorts of men and women to wear the uniform, but at Tinker, for example, a large number of that workforce are civil servants. So they're native Oklahomans in many cases, Oklahoma born, bred, educated. They work at Tinker 20, 30 years. They add tremendous value. working on all sorts of modern weapon systems from, as I mentioned, space fence and space surveillance and nuclear command and control, satellite control programs, all the way to taking care of B-52s, the last one of which was built before I was born and will be in service till 2040. So that demand signal on behalf of your United States Air Force will do nothing but increase. But as large defense firms like Boeing and Northrop Grumman bring more and more of their workforce into Oklahoma, they too will put a demand signal on that engineering talent that comes out of Oklahoma State. So we are very happy about our partnership with Oklahoma State. We want to nurture that. We want to grow it and sustain it, not only for my own sort of selfish needs at Tinker Air Force Base, but for the benefit of Oklahoma as we increase the presence of the aviation and defense sector as part of an increasingly diversified economy inside of the state of Oklahoma, which I think benefits all Oklahomans going forward, and not just those of us in the defense sector.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on campus, General Levy.
Well, thank you, sir.
We've learned a lot, and we too very much appreciate the partnership with Tinker, and we know it's in good hands under your leadership.
Well, thanks, President.
Thanks a lot.
Go Pokes.
You bet. Well, that's another edition of Inside OSU, and with General Lee Levy, Commanding General of Tinker Air Force Base. We'll see you at the next episode, and between now and then, remember, bloom where planted.